Welcome to the October Woodlands OCF Luncheon, where Charley Mathis is going to give his testimony. Charley Mathis recently restarted the Tulsa OCF Luncheon. So if you're in the Tulsa area, please come to the website, find out more information, and join them. Enjoy the talk.
As John mentioned, my beautiful wife Miranda and I, we just celebrated 14 years Monday. We went to Branson Sunday, spent Sunday through Tuesday with the kids in Branson, had a good anniversary. John and I, after the meeting was over, I went up and introduced myself, and he was talking to a gentleman, and he said, "Hey, I need a speaker for Thursday." And he said, "Well, unfortunately, I can't. I'm in Florida." Immediately, I get that sensation, "Hey, you need to step up." And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to talk. Like, I'm a sales guy. I love people. I love talking to people. But getting in front of a crowd, I've always got high anxiety. I get nervous. I start stuttering. I feel like I stutter. People say I don't. I get nervous. And so you immediately have that dialect. The enemy comes in. Hey, you know you don't want to do that because this is how you're going to feel. Hey, you know if you do that, this ain't something you want to do, but you know that for the glory of God that's what you're to do, and so you step forth and do so. So as he asked, I was like, "Hey, I may be available Thursday." We was thinking about staying through Branson through Wednesday. If we don't do that, I can make that. And so I called Miranda, and she was like, "Yeah, I think that's something you ought to do. We'll make it work." And her sister lives in Dallas, so it works out perfect for us. So glad to be here, glad to be part of this. As John mentioned, I've been in the oil field 18 years. I spent 8.5 years at Weatherford, spent 4 years at Cud Energy Services, and then I've been at TTS for 5. The last 12 years I've done business development in Tulsa. The market that I'm in Tulsa, when I moved there 12 years ago to today, is two totally different markets. 12 years ago, I could call on people for 2 months and never trip over the same guy twice. Unfortunately, today, in 2 weeks, I can trip over everybody that's there. So it's kind of hard to justify a full-time sales job there. Last day kicked back off. Pre-COVID, we've had a pretty good attendance. We probably run 30 to 50 people. COVID hit, and pretty much that went away. We haven't had OCF until 2 months ago in August. I happened to be at the SPE symposium in Oklahoma City. Jeff Hubbard, who is the president of OCF in Oklahoma City, come up and we was talking. I shared my family, just kind of like as most of you get around, I start sharing about my family, what God's doing in our life, how he works through my life, like how I've been blessed. And anyways, Jeff was like, "Hey man, I need you to share that at Oklahoma City at our OCF." And I was like, "Whoa, hold on, there comes that dialect again. Oh no, I'm not your guy. I do not want to speak. I don't want to be that guy. And hey, but I don't want you to tell me right now. I want you to go pray on it." And immediately there's that relief of, whew, you dodged the bullet on this one. You don't have to speak, but on the other side, you know that you got to speak. You should have said yes in that moment. And so a couple months go by, Miranda and I are at the Petroleum Alliance in Dallas, introduced Jeff. We introduced wives, and he said, "Hey, let's me and you step to the side." And he starts telling me about this book by Clarence DeGraff. It's called The 10-Second Rule. In the next 10 seconds, do the next right thing. Whatever God lays on your heart in the next 10 seconds, do what's right. Hey, have you had any more chance to think about speaking? Jeff Hubbard, man, dude, back me in the corner. Your buddy, he's good. He's really good. So blessing to be able to speak, to do that. So it also helped whenever I did that. Chad Trainer, he helped Jim Smith run the Tulsa OCF, and so Chad had been thinking about kicking it back off again. Well, we had went and met for coffee. Chad works at H&P. I was wanting to pick his brain on some geothermal stuff. They do some geothermal wells, and Chad and I got to talk that morning. I said, "Hey, Jeff asked me the other day if I'd speak at OCF in Oklahoma City." I said, "I'm going to speak." And "Oh, Charlie, you do not know what you just opened the door up to." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Me and you're kicking off the OCF again." I was like, "Oh, I didn't commit to that. I'm just telling you that I've been asked to speak." And he's like, No. You're going to speak here, and then you're going to go there and speak. So we're going to kick it off." And so we did. We had right at about 22 guys show up for our first time. I told him the concern was we may not be able to get enough people to come. He didn't know how many would show up. I just know through my conversations, through customers, other sales guys, I have a lot of personal conversations of Christ. I knew off the top of my head I can invite 30 guys right off the top of my head that'll show up. But with me speaking, I didn't want it advertised for me speaking because I don't want guys showing up for me. I want them showing up for Christ. They're coming for the right reason. I didn't want to be in that position. So as I invited guys, we didn't let nobody. We just said, hey, the day of, you'll find out who the speaker is. And like I say, it was a blessing in disguise to be able to do so. So glad to be part of that. The other thing, a part of the OCF is they give me all these Bibles last month when I went to the meeting, and I'm going through them, and there's Chinese and there's Spanish, and I'm like, who in the world in Tulsa, Oklahoma speaks Chinese? I've never met a person that speaks Chinese. Like, what are we going to do with this entire box of Bibles of Chinese Bibles? Well, God has a way of working very mysteriously. The following Wednesday, I finished my men's class. I'm headed to meet Miranda and the kids. She teaches a class on Wednesday nights, and as I'm coming down the stairs, this young lady walks up and she said, hey, sir, what do you do for work? And I said, well, I work oil and gas. Oh, I got to do an interview with you. Well, I know she's Asian descent, didn't know exactly what her ethnicity was. And she said, well, tell me more about what you do. And so I started telling her. She's like, well, I'm in business energy management, getting my master's degree in TU, Tulsa University. She's like, I got to interview 10 people in the energy sector. And she said, I want to interview. And I'm like, but I'm a sales guy. Like, I'm not an engineer. I'm not somebody that I feel like you need to interview. I feel like you need to talk to an engineer, CEO, somebody up the ladder. And me, I'm down here. And she's like, no, you be great. And so I set up a time and date, told Miranda we met at a Starbucks. The day before, she texts me and says, hey, I got to thinking about the questions and the conversation. You know, I lived in China, and when I grew up in China, and I was like, oh my, I have a whole entire box of Bibles that are in Chinese in my garage, and I'm going to meet with a lady that speaks Chinese. Like, wow, like, is that not cool? So I took those Bibles. I took quite a few of them. I give them to her, and she was so excited to be able to take them back, to send them to her family. She feels like God's led them to Tulsa to do ministry in Tulsa, and so she plans to stay there. But so as far as my family is, we got into the adoption process at the beginning of 2016. A couple of family friends. We was in a marriage class. We got to know. They had a little boy. We got to know, and it kind of led to Miranda. God put it on her heart to want to do the adoption thing, and I stand before you, and I'm not proud to say what I'm about to say, but I got to be honest and be truthful to people, because I know there's other men, there's other families going through the same thing. I so much was not on the same page as my wife when it came to that. I was not ready to do the adoption thing. I struggled with it. I had a thought of, it's not my blood, it's not in my house kind of scenario, and I won't lie, there's days I still struggle, but me and Brandon, we got a good relationship. We butt heads from time to time, but God has a way of showing you through something like that, hey, I'm here to change you and change your heart. And so we went down that road. October 6th or 7th was our 7-year anniversary that we signed adoption papers. Through the adoption, as mentioned, we've gone through some trials and tribulations. We've gone through some treatment plans, and we've had to learn therapists and psychiatrists and different types of medications. And going through all that has put people in our path. And as people have come forth in our path, you get the chance to share Christ and what God's doing in your life. And He allows us a lot of times to go through things that may not so much be for us, but it's to help someone else. He allows you to go through that trial and tribulation, not for yourself, but to help somebody else. And we see that all the time, whether that's us being put in somebody's path or somebody being put in our path. And I'll share a couple stories in a minute on that. But I follow Joby Martin. Tim Tebow goes to Joby Martin's church. He's got 1122 Church out of Jacksonville, Florida. And Joby wrote a book last year called If the Tomb is Empty. And if the tomb is empty, he talks about the significance of the 7 mountains in the Bible. And one of the things he talks about, he said, if you ever look at your life across just a plain view, a linear view of what your life looks like, he said, you'll realize that very little of your life is spent on top of the mountain. And on top of the mountain, that's where we find the glory of God. That's where we find we're the closest to God. Life's as good as life's going to get. Life cannot get any better than it is right now. But guess what? That doesn't last long, because you're headed off that mountain to another trial and tribulation. And as you're going down the mountain, when you get into the bottom of the valley, that's when you draw closest to God. That's when you find out you yourself cannot control the circumstance that you're in. You can't control what's going on in your life, and that's when you draw close to God and you allow God to handle whatever it is. You just drop everything on God at that moment and say, Jesus, I know in this moment I cannot handle this. I need you, and you let Jesus handle that. So through that, we've experienced quite a few of the valleys. The valleys are hard, the valleys are tough, but along with that, what we have found through the valleys is those people that cross our paths. I was getting my hair cut here, probably about 5 years ago now. Brandon's therapist happened to be on the back side of this haircut place, and Miranda was taking him to get his haircut there, and the lady that was there, she got to liking Brandon, and anyways, Miranda decided to start cutting his hair herself and save us a little bit of money, and so she started doing that. And so one day, my lady that cut my hair left town, and she moved to California. And so we used to go there. I'll stop in there and see if she can cut my hair. And so sure enough, she cut my hair a few times. Hey, how's my little buddy doing? I'm like, well, we're going through some stuff right now. And so I started kind of sharing, and this girl in the back, she kind of pricked her head up, and she's like, and so we kept talking about time. She comes up and she starts asking some questions. And, I was like, man, who are you? Like, why are you asking me these questions? Like, those are pretty personal questions you're asking there. Like, very personal questions, got talking about, some of the things we were going through. And I kept getting that notion, to answer her questions. So I kept answering questions. And, as I did so, I just kept, what does she want with these? Like, what is she asking me these for? Well, here we are 5 years later now. Her son has the exact same diagnosis that Brandon deals with, to a T. He's got one other one that we do not. She didn't know where to turn. She had no resources. She's on an island by herself. She feels alone. She's lost. She has nowhere to turn. And God put us in her path at the right time, because in that moment we were able to start sharing therapists, psychiatrists. We've shared all of our stuff we've been through. We did the Renew You, which is the neurological feedback retraining the brain and stuff. And it's amazing when you start digging off into the neurology stuff of how we're wired as people and human. God designed us so perfectly. That right there itself just shows just how mighty our God is that we serve. It's, amazing. But Courtney and I, we now for 5 years, she cuts my hair every 2 weeks. We talk about our kids. We talk about what's going on. Oh yeah, we've been through that. So I'd love to tell you it's going to get better. Hey, guess what? You're going to find some more tribulations coming your way. With time, it gets better, and the valleys get shallower. So we were offered to speak at our church when we first adopted, and we get up there, and I love to talk as much as anybody. But like I say, when I get in front of a crowd, I get nervous. And that morning, our congregation is about 500 at the 8:30 service, and so Miranda and I was asked to speak. So we get up there and get started talking, and immediately I draw a blank. I lose all thought process. I don't know what the last word I said. All I know is these bright lights are hitting me in the face. And as a good wife, she's standing there and she puts her arm around me and kind of does, hey, you got this. And I'm froze. There's not a word coming out of my mouth. I don't know what to say right now. And she said, come on, baby, you got this. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm froze. Like, I don't even know what I said. Like, I don't even know where to start. And so I finally step back. Miranda steps up to the stage or the podium, and she starts speaking, and, she gets real emotional. She gets real teary-eyed. She starts crying, and I'm mortified. Like, I'm embarrassed. Like, I can't believe, like, everybody's staring at me. Like, I am so mortified over this, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like, how did you lose your train of thought, And so as she got done, we're walking off the stage, our pastor, and he's like, good job. And I'm like, what do you mean good job? Like, no, like, I completely lost it. And he was like, wasn't meant for you to speak. Somebody in there needed to hear your wife's voice this morning, not your voice. They didn't need to hear from a man. They needed to hear from a woman. God did exactly what he needed to happen in that room this morning. And I'm like, no, that's still not okay. Like, and immediately it's all about me, right? I'm so focused on me and not, hey, yes, God needed somebody. He sure enough did, because through a family friend of ours, a lady happened to be at the church that morning, and her husband were looking to adopt. And she writes us a letter and told us how impactful my wife's story was that morning. And they actually have adopted now. It was because of my wife speaking that morning that led them to know that was Christ calling them to do the adoption. And, in the same for Miranda's dad, he passed away here a couple years ago. And we went to dinner, when he had passed. Her and her aunt, we went down on Wednesday, and I dug a hole for his ashes, and we had waited for an aunt to come in, and she finally made it in from Kentucky. And so the next morning they were going down to McAllister to bury him with her aunts, and then we was going to do the service on Saturday. And so they go down Thursday night, we all go out to dinner. Well, she stopped at Walmart to have some pictures developed on the way, and we all go to dinner and start eating and stuff, and they're taking forever. Like, it's the longest dinner ever. And so she quick eats and jets out, go get pictures. Me and the kids were on our way home, and Miranda calls, and I know the moment I answered that phone, I knew something was wrong when I first heard her voice. Like, something has happened, something's wrong. And she's like, "Hey, babe, I've had a wreck. I'm okay." She's crying. You can hear her voice, like she's mortified. And I was like, "It's okay." I'm turning around. She's like, "They're so nice, though. They're such nice people, And I said, "Okay, I'll be there in a few minutes." And so as soon as I get there, I get out and checking on everything and introduce. And, one of the first things I always ask people when I first introduce is, "Where are you from? Have I been there? Do I know somebody from there?" I'm looking for commonality with whoever I'm speaking to. And that usually starts building that foundation of a relationship, right? Understanding where somebody's from. And so as we sat there and started to get talk, "Where you guys from?" "Oh, we live here in Glenpool." And I was like, "Well, you from Glenpool?" No. We grew up in Manford and Sand Springs." I'm like, "Manford, huh?" Our community teachers, they're from Manford. He's the superintendent at Manford, Kelly Spradlin. "Oh, you know Angie and Kelly?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're our teachers." "Well, she taught me in the 8th grade. Like, I've known them forever." And, we just have this small world. And I'm like, "Hey, why don't y'all come join us to church?" They're two of our closest friends. That night, when they met us through a wreck, you can't make this up. My wife is backing up at a stop sign to let a semi in. They come up behind, and basically she runs over the top of them, totals out their vehicle, maybe 10 miles per hour at the most. They totaled their vehicle out. When they met us that night and realized Brandon was adopted, that was their sign from God that they needed to adopt. In that moment, that was clarity. That everything we've been praying about, that was the clarity that they needed. I spoke with Garrett yesterday on the way down here. The little boy that they now have in their house, they've had for 6 months. Mom never named him. He goes by Baby A. They now call him AJ. They go next week to meet, and unless she shows up and fights it as of next week, her rights will be terminated and they'll get to do a full adoption. And for me, God just has a way of putting people in your path at the right time and right place. And sometimes the wrong time and the wrong place, but it's God's right timing when it happens. And if you're faithful and obedient in that moment, and just share your story. I've always been scared to share my faith with people. Up until 2021, I'd never read the Bible all the way through. I got baptized in 1999 when I was graduating high school. The morning of my graduation, I was baptized at church. We had a baccalaureate, had a sermon, and then you graduated. I got baptized in 99. In 2021, I finally was like, I'll sit here and call myself a Christian, but I've never read the Bible all the way through. Like, how can I call myself a Christian and I've never read God's Word to its entirety? I set a goal that year. I did it on the Bible app. I broke it up to where I did 3 chapters of Old Testament, 3 chapters of New. And I was also amazed that as I would read in the mornings, when I would leave the Old Testament and get to the New, I would read exactly what I just read in the Old Testament. And, I think if I'd have read front to back, I probably wouldn't ever have picked that up. God just had a way of speaking and changing my heart in that time. He taught me so much. I've never felt closer that year to God than I ever have been before. And like I say, I've been a Christian at that time, for 20 years, 21 years. And it's like, wow, it's taken me this long. But he finally spoke to me through that. I got to I dealt with some high anxiety stuff. I had some high heart rates, with some of the stuff that we were going through, our trials and tribulations. A lot of that compounded. I was in a customer's office one day, my arm went numb, and it kept coming and coming. And, I was always told if your left arm goes numb, that's a sign of a heart attack. And immediately my mind went, hey, you're fixing to meet your maker. And all I could think was my family and never seeing my wife. And I panicked. I went into an anxiety attack. I went into a panic mode. Everything checked out to be all right. It's just stress, too much going on. And, but through that, a buddy of mine, he was like, hey, I got this book you need to read. It's called Victory in Spiritual Warfare by Tony Evans. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. The spiritual warfare that we face each and every day is real. I felt it this last week. I felt it Sunday. I committed to this on Friday. Sunday, we got to Branson. Things on Sunday was not going our way. We had a bad day Sunday. We finally got there. Miranda and I was kind of at that point. We kind of almost wanted to turn around and go home. It was so bad. We was on our way to dinner. And where's the enemy get you? He gets you at your weakest point, where he knows that he can kick you in the knee and drop you down. And he knows for me, the anxiety, the nervousness, the feeling of, I had a pain right here and it just wouldn't go away. I'm like, what is that? And next thing I know, I had a full-blown anxiety panic attack. My heart rate jumped up, and it was exactly what I dealt with in that office that day. Prayed through it. I've learned that anytime stuff like that happens, you start praying. You pray. That's the first thing you do. You start praying. You quit whatever's going on in life. Don't worry about it. You pray. In that moment, you start praying, and it goes away. But guess what? 5 minutes later, it comes right back. What do? You pray again. And the enemy, he just keeps coming and coming. Yesterday on the way down here, I kept feeling it, and it's like, that's when God is calling you to do something right. When the enemy's trying to stop you from doing something, that God's calling you to do it, and definitely wasn't going to land it, stand in the way with us. So whenever I was on my way to Lafayette last week, I got on a plane Monday. I drove to Oklahoma City. I flew from Oklahoma City to Dallas. I get on a plane in Dallas and put my earphones in, and I'm going to listen to music. Whoever sits beside me, I'm not talking. Like, I'm going to save my voice. I knew I had the oil and gas show coming up. I knew I had the forum I had to go to. I knew I'm going to talk to a lot of people, and so I'm kind of keeping my voice. And the gentleman sits down, and we nodded at each other, and I look back out the window. I'm like, not talking to you. I got my music in. I just downloaded an Alabama album, and I'm listening to Alabama and sitting there waiting. The plane's not pushing back, and it's like, hey, what in the world's going on? Like, we ought to be pushing back by now. And, I'm in no rush to get there. I'm not going to be late for anything. And so I went to pull my earbud out to ask him, hey, what's going on? And about time, the flight attendant says, hey, we're waiting on the pilot. He's across the airport. He'll be here in a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, we're about 20 minutes behind. No big deal. And about time he says, well, what do you do for work? Well, I guess we're starting a conversation. I work in the oil field. Oh, my brother does too. He's a geologist. Hey, guess what? I used to work on a rig. Really? So we get in this conversation. We start talking. I pull out their earbud. I guess I'm talking all the way to Lafayette. And so I put my earbuds up. And, you married? Yeah. Pull out my phone. Start sharing just like I normally would. Brandon's adopted. Really? Now, how does that work for you? It has its moments. It's got its trials, its tribulations. Man, I don't know how you do it. And I said, well, I'll tell you how I do it, how we do it. Every day you go through something, guess what? Tomorrow morning, God gives you a fresh breath to start all over. You screwed up yesterday, but today's a new day. You get to start all over. And that's how you get through it. That's how you get through life every single day. It's not just an adoption thing. It's work, it's life. It doesn't matter what it is that you're going through. Every day, God gives you a chance to start all over. Hey, you screwed up 5 minutes ago. Guess what? The next minute, you can start all over again. And so we got to chit-chatting. I was sharing, my wife had just quit her job. We're kind of doing countercultural right now. She built a career of 12 years at Laredo Petroleum, which is now Vital Energy. She built their treasury department from scratch 10 years ago. And she gave notice to quit her job. And she's homeschooling her kids this year. And so I was sharing that, and I said, we go to church. She teaches at church. I serve as a deacon. I'm in a part of a men's ministry, and I kind of got to sharing, and he said, what about this Jesus guy I keep hearing about? Excuse me? What about this Jesus guy? Who's this Jesus guy? Like, God sent this Jesus to do something. Like, you got this old commandment. You got this Jesus guy. Like, what is that? And I'm like, what? I've never had nobody come out and ask me directly about who's Jesus. Like, unfortunately, I live in a Bible Belt, and I just assume that the majority of people I'm around know Jesus. That's a real quick indicator. Not everybody that you're around every day knows Jesus. They may have heard about him, but they don't have a clue who he is and what he does in your life. And so, well, let's have a conversation. And so one of the things I was telling him that stood out, and I was telling this the other day to a guy, have you ever realized, our pastor spoke on this about 8 months ago, and it just stuck with me. And right in that moment, I had to say a prayer. I was like, God, I don't know where this guy needs to hear, what he needs to hear, or where I need to start. Like, I have no clue. All I know is I'm a vessel, and I need you to speak right now. I am yours. Speak through me. And the conversation started. And so we started in the Old Testament, what the law was about, and when you commit a sin and you repent, there had to be a sacrifice that sheds blood. Then we get to the New Testament. We talked about the reason God sent his son, God in flesh, teaches us what God looks like, how to act. Kind of go through this. And I told him, I said, the one thing you'll find with Jesus, I said, have you ever noticed when something clean touches something dirty, it immediately becomes dirty? But it's completely opposite with Jesus Christ. The moment something dirty touches Jesus, who's clean, it immediately becomes clean. And that's the transformation of our hearts. And that's why Jesus was sent. He was sent to transform our hearts and to bring us to God. He was the ultimate sacrifice for you and I and every person of mankind on this earth. And the conversation paused. And it took a big pause. I've never heard that. I'm going to have to go chew on that. I need your business card. Me and you got to have some conversation. And and in that moment, all I could think about was, here, I almost left my earbuds in to ignore the gentleman sitting next to me. And I could have missed an opportunity to share my faith in Christ and what Christ has done in my life and my family's life. And here, I almost missed that opportunity. And I thank God that man spoke to me first when the moment I had my earbud out and I was able to share my faith. So what I'll leave you with today is obedience. In that moment when God puts that gut sensation in you, when you feel God, the Holy Spirit nudging you, it's probably pretty good to act upon it. You'll be blessed in a way. I can't tell you how I felt that day after talking to that man. The blessing I received, you can't put a price on it. Money doesn't compare to what I felt at the end. God spoke to me in a way that oh man, wow. And all I could think about is how many times have I missed the opportunity to bless somebody else and miss the blessing myself. Not only them, but the blessing myself and how it feels. So be obedient. When God calls you, be obedient, step up. Same here, John. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak. Thank you guys for the hospitality and having me and my family today. We appreciate it for sure. Thank you.